Hello there. I'm Gene Shepard, and I have the great privilege to read one of my short stories to you. And this short story, by the way, has a kind of an interesting history. It won the Playboy Humor Satire Award for the year that it came out, a very prestigious award, I might add. It also has been used in one major motion picture at this time, and another is now contemplated. And it's been republished in at least 15 languages around the world in various forms, and is quite often in the curricula in universities for studying American lit. So anyway, I think you'll enjoy it, at least I hope you will. And the title of this story is called Leopold Doppler and the Great Orpheum Gravy Boat Riot. 5,000 years from now, when future archaeologists are picking and scraping among the shards and midden heaps, attempting to put together the mosaic of the rich, full life led by 20th century man, they will come across many a mystery that is impenetrable even to those who lived through it. For example, a cracked fragment of a little orphan Annie Ovaltine shake-up mug, a Shirley Temple cream pitcher, a heavily corroded Tomix Lucky Horseshoe Nail Ring, an incomplete set of Gilbert Roland, Paula Negri, Richard Barthelmess movie star sterling silver teaspoons with embossed autographs will undoubtedly be key items in a file marked Inexplicable Abortive Religious Objects, found in great numbers, yet with no seeming direct connection with the greater philosophical currents of the time. But we will know, won't we? Certainly do. Not long ago, in a shabby motel in New England, I sat down on a cold, rainy dawn to a bowl of soggy Wheaties and found myself suddenly, and for no reason, thinking of Rochelle Hudson. Rochelle Hudson. She had not entered my conscious musing since the age of 8. The sound of traffic roaring by on the main turnpike reminded me that reality was only 100 yards away as I spooned up more of the cereal that Jack Armstrong ate and that Hudson High won its football games for. I hurled Rochelle Hudson from my mind. Instantly, she was replaced by Warner Oland, the original and definitive Charlie Chan. He grinned at me from under his Homburg enigmatically and disappeared. And there stood Judge Hardy, about to have a man-to-man talk with either me or Mickey Rooney. The thump of a football and roly-poly Jack Oakey, wearing a white sweater with a big block C, picked up his megaphone and started a locomotive as Tom Brown, his arm in a sling, June Pricer clinging to his jersey, trotted out on the gridiron. Center College 6 points behind and only 4 seconds left in the big game. The crowd roared, blending with the sound of a huge diesel bellowing by on its way to Augusta. I was yanked back to the now momentarily as a plate of toast was clanked down next to my coffee. But I could not fight it. Without reason or rhyme, the film unwound in my subconscious, picking up the tempo of the thundering traffic on the great turnpike as Jimmy Cagney, his Maserati in flames, roared past the immense grandstands at Indianapolis, the mob screaming for blood, his oil line broken, his faithful mechanic, Frank McHugh, dying of burns in the cockpit next to him. The checker flag fell as Jimmy, his goggles misted from streaming gasoline, a thin, ironical smile on his lips, swerved into the pits. Out stepped Alan Hale, rugged, silver-haired, beaming in the full-dress uniform of the Royal Canadian Mounted. With him, riding easy in the saddle, was Dick Ferran, and a string of broad-chested Malamute dogs howled as they headed into the great forest after another fugitive from justice. With an enormous conscious wrench of willpower, I struggled to break this ridiculous montage of fantasies that continued to crowd irresistibly in upon me. I could not get my mind off these shifting kaleidoscopic images. I tried to concentrate on the road map as I finished the Wheaties, and the harder I stared at the red lines, the more they seemed to resemble Pat O'Brien in the uniform of a Navy chief barking out orders to Wallace Beery. What the hell is this? I'm a grown-up. I'm a hard-hitting, hip, contemporary man, and I have no time for such transient, imbecilic time-wasters. Leave that stuff to the movie critics, for crying out loud. I swished my plastic spoon around the bottom of the bowl to scoop up the last few spongy flakes, and it was at that instant that I knew it was the bowl itself that had caused Rochelle Hudson to make an unscheduled guest appearance. I stared hard at it. It was unmistakable, a bowl of remarkably aggressive ugliness, made of a distinctive type of dark green glass embossed with swollen lumps and swirls representing what appeared to be the fruits of the vine and the abundance of nature. A disgusting bowl, a bowl that had but one meaning. I peered at it, long and hard. Yes, there was no mistake. It was genuine. A mint-condition, vintage, movie dish night premium gift bowl. I glanced the length of the lunch counter at the proprietor, who lounged listlessly next to the coffee urn, watching the rain fall outside on his gravel driveway, something he had done for 12 straight years. It always rains in Maine. We were alone. I could not resist it. Excuse me, but what kind of bowl is this? I asked. He looked up. What do you mean, what kind of bowl? It's glass, stupid. Yeah, I know it's glass, but where did you get it? Hey, what do you mean? Are you the inspector? I never knew there were cereal bowl inspectors working the Maine Turnpike. No, it's just that you don't see bowls like this very often. He looked back out at the rain, and I knew that our conversation was at an end. I stirred my coffee and examined the green glass monstrosity lovingly as I faintly heard Myrna Loy's mocking voice twitting William Powell through the sounds of the radio in the kitchen, which was playing a Beatle record. Yes, in attics and cellars and kitchen cupboards throughout the length and breadth of America, there are still remnants, bits and pieces of movie, night, dish, deluxe, dinnerware sets. Some green glass, others blood red, a few a strange pearlescent orange, but all united in universal ugliness. Ugliness unfettered, unrestrained by effete taste, as direct and uncluttered as a Johnny Weissmuller scenario. The kind of ugliness so pure and distilled that it shines with the light of golden radiance, pure in heart, and the simple in mind can create this kind of ugliness. Ugliness so stark and clean that it has a kind of beauty in its own clarity. And the sellers of beauty have never had it easy in this or any other age. And Mr. Doppler was no exception. Mr. Doppler, my God, I even remembered his name. But then actually, how could I forget it? I gazed mistily into the cloudy depths of the glass bowl, and the images of that fateful night began to emerge from the milky film that lined the bottom. Mr. Doppler and the great gravy boat riot. Eerily, faintly, the radio in the kitchen began to play Artie Shaw's Begin the Beguine, and the story slowly all came back to me. Mr. Doppler operated the Orpheum Theater, a tiny bastion of dreams and fantasies, a fragile light of human aspiration in the howling darkness of the great American Midwest, where I festered and grew as a youth. Even now the word Orpheum sends tiny shivers of anticipation and excitement up the ventilation pipes of my soul. And Mr. Doppler, like some mythical god, reigned over his magnetic palace of dreams, fighting the good fight alone and uncheered. He was rarely seen in person. His name, however, always stood at the head of the program Throwaways that landed on the porch every Monday afternoon outlining the Orpheum's schedule of mirages for the following week. In Roman letters, surrounded by cherubs blowing trumpets and a kind of Egyptian architectural arch festooned with grapes and tiny cornucopias, and presided over by a pair of blurred Greco-Xanic tragedy-comedy masks, would appear this exclamation, a true proclamation: Leopold Doppler presents. Leopold Doppler presents. This smudgy, dog-eared schedule was kept next to every icebox in the county for ready reference and to settle arguments of a theological nature. Mr. Doppler was in direct communion with Dennis Morgan, and he personally had a hand in Roy Rogers' affairs. Hollywood was a mysterious thing in those days, even more so than today, and for good reason. It was more mysterious. It was the time of the Great Depression. People read photoplay and screen romances and other dream journals as seriously as today they read, say, the Wall Street Journal or Time, contemporary fantasy almanacs. But we had ours. One time, my Aunt Clara lapped the entire field at Christmas by giving my grandmother a 2-year subscription to Real Screen Tales. What a great magazine. The actual stories of all the films. So night after night, the faithful would gather, bearing sacks of Butterfinger bars and salami sandwiches to huddle together in the darkness, cradled in Mr. Doppler's gum-encrusted seats, staring with eyes wide with longing and lit with the pure light of total belief at the flickering image of Ginger Rogers, dressed in a long, flowing, sequin-covered gown, swirling endlessly atop a piano with Fred Astaire, flicking an ivory cane carelessly and spinning his tall silk hat as he sang, in a high, squeaky voice, the karaoke, la-da-dee. In the darkness, the sound of girdles creaking in desire, and the cracking of Wrigley's spearmint in excitement provided a soft but subtle counterpoint to Sam Goldwyn's hissing soundtrack. Now, outside those sacred doors crouched the pale, gray wolf of reality and the depression. On the skyline, the dark, sullen hulk of the steel mills lay silent and smokeless, like some ancient volcano that had burned itself out, while the natives roamed the empty streets and told wondrous tales of the time when the skies were actually lit by the fire of the steel crucibles. And there was something that occupied them all. And what was that called? Work. Even the word itself had almost religious, mythological tones. Work. People would speak of work the way we talk of the times when there were pirates. There used to be work around here, they'd say, and others would snort and say, oh, come on, don't tell me that. On Saturdays, the congregation consisted almost entirely of kids at the Orpheum, at least during the daylight hours. The carved Moorish doors of the Orpheum were flung wide open from 10 a.m. on, and the moiling rabble who came to spend the entire day and weekend if they could get away with it. 3 cowboy pictures featuring such fantastic luminaries as Roy Rogers, Bob Steele, and Ken Maynard, galloped endlessly over the back lots of dusty Los Angeles real estate, firing countless rounds of black smoke, black cartridges. The soundtrack turned up to deafening volume. The thunder of movie horses, the screams and grunts of the wounded and dying mingled with the steady uproar of the popcorn machine and the occasional outbreak of a fistfight in the balcony and an incessant two-way traffic up and down the aisles to the plumbing facilities. The muffled curses of the ushers clubbing the more violent into submission provided those of us who were there with a great and accurate foretaste of actual life to come. More than one kid, caught up in the inchoate intricacies of a Republic picture cowboy plot, find himself torn between answering an urgent call of nature or missing the final defeat of the treacherous sheep ranchers, and had to make a bitter and crucial decision. It almost invariably went one way. Many a kid had to skulk damply back down back alleys on his way home in total darkness to avoid public humiliation, his corduroy knickers squashing limply, as he crept from garage to garage, from chicken house to chicken house, hoping against hope that the spanking breeze from the lake would dehydrate him in time for getting home. Clamped in his seat from 10 a.m. to well past 7 p.m., or just before the greasy love stuff came on, a kid swirled in a maelstrom of excitement and convulsive passion that has left a lasting mark on all who sat in attendance. There are countless men today, and not a few women, who have what they euphemistically call bad knees. Bad knees. Well, that results from a malady just recently diagnosed as triple feature paralysis, a knee permanently assuming a lambent L shape with a concomitant bruise and contusion resulting from action in the seat ahead. The guy rocks his seat ahead of you, accompanied by a quick snapping cramp of the upper buttocks. You get that, you got it. Its symptoms are unmistakable. Strategically placed between the cowboy epics were episodes of Flash Gordon and Superman serials to quell the troops between rounds of gunfire and volleys of guitar playing. Outright anger rolled in waves from the audience, invariably the instant Gene Autry took up his damn Sears Roebuck melody box to sing Red River Valley through his noble Roman nose. It was a distinctly anti-singing crowd. Luckily, Autry worked in the pre-Switchblade era, but there were other means to vent aggression on a beaded screen. As the first notes of the steel guitar rolled out over the throng, a shower of bottle caps and chocolate-covered raisins arched through the hazy, flickering beam of light that cut the darkness above our heads. The ushers leaped forward at the ready, but by then the gunfire had reasserted itself on the screen, and blessed violence stilled the mob. It was really early TV, but with far more audience participation. They were into it. A colossal high point came along about the third running of Thunder on the Prairie, starring Johnny Mac Brown. The lights would go up in the house, illuminating the scene of carnage and juvenile debauchery unrivaled in the most decadent day of the Roman downfall. Knee-deep in Baby Ruth wrappers, sated with popcorn, jaws aching from a 6-hour session of bubblegum chewing, we sat holding our blessed ticket stub, waiting for the fateful drawing. On stage was wheeled a chicken wire drum filled with torn tickets, and behind a silver bullet-shaped microphone appeared the slight but commanding, black-clad, balding figure of the great legendary Mr. Doppler himself, in person. Behind him was piled the loot for that day. Chicago roller-bearing roller skates, Hack Wilson model fielder's mitts, Benjamin air rifles, and of course the grand prize, a Columbia bicycle with balloon tires and two-tone iridescent paint. Mr. Doppler grabbed the audience hard and fast with his opening line, the instinct of a sure-born showman blazing through. "Shut up in the balcony!" To a kid, we scrunched forward in our teetery seats, Hershey bars clasped frozen in midair, dripping between unheeding fingers. Ticket stub held at ready, we waited, expectantly, for our number to be called. Two ushers on stage spun the drum, and a volunteer, usually a wiry, pimply-faced lout from the first 2 or 3 rows, pulled the tickets, while Mr. Doppler, milking each drawn number for all it was worth, built the drama of expectancy as surely and skillfully as any true dramatist can. At long last, the grand prize. The house lights dimmed and went out. Wheeled center stage in the brilliant blue-white vaudeville spot, it stood alone and coldly inaccessible. A vast hush falls over the huddled throng, broken only by the soft, muted squishing of Mary Janes being ground to bits by loose milk teeth. All things hung suspended as the drum spun. It spun in and slowly and finally stopped. Doppler raised his hand imperiously in the way that mighty Casey must have, quelling the multitude as the crucial moment approached. Absolute silence as the volunteer's grubby claw fished among the ticket stubs, searching for his own, no doubt. Finally, drawing from the chicken wire cage a tiny orange fleck of torn paper. He solemnly handed it to the usher, who ceremoniously presented it to Mr. Doppler. The sun stood still in the firmament. Mr. Doppler gazed for a moment at the stub, and then looked meaningfully out over the audience, and back again to the stub, his voice ringing with feedback, intoned, "The winning number is D." A pregnant pause. We hunched forward as one man, seats creaking in unison. All our tickets began with D. D. 7. Muffled groans, anguished outcries. Seats slammed angrily in isolated spots. Doppler raised his eyes menacingly. Again, silence. D. 7. O. More screams and thumps. My palm itched sweatily. I was still in the running. This could be the week. Mr. Doppler continued, pretending to have difficulty in reading the numbers. D. 7O. Let's see. This is D703. On a rising inflection, the audience, now in a state of frenzy, scattered wails of lament and thuds of bodies falling amid popcorn cartons as Doppler closed with a smashing finish, his voice rising to a crescendo, D7038. I sank back into my seat as a high, thin squeal came from somewhere near the exit sign to the left of the popcorn stand. A great roar arose among the defeated as a tiny limp figure carried down the aisle by jubilant companions rushed toward the stage, yipping as they came. My God, it was a girl! A girl! Muttered obscenities in the darkness. The mob was now in an angry mood at this unexpected turn of events. A girl! Flick, next to me, half rose in his cockpit, his meat hook poised to hurl the remnants of a taffy apple on stage in a gesture of defiance. The sharp bark of an usher in the aisle caught him in midair. "Sit down! Sit down, kid!" The flashlight beam caught Flick, taffy apple cocked, jaw set. He sat down sheepishly. On stage it was all anticlimax, and Mr. Doppler knew it. Quickly wrapping up the scene, he hurried the bicycle kids and ushers off stage, and darkness fell. As we prepared for the first volley of the fourth feature of the afternoon, it was again the beating surf of crackling paper wrappers, the steady crunch, crunch, crunch of mastication, picked up in tempo and blended into the fanfare of bugles, superimposed on the opening credits, and the great classic line, "Republic Pictures presents." As the longest day wore on, time completely obliterated, the outside world non-existent, no day, no night, just the thunder of the pursued and the pursuers, and the crunch of fist meeting jaw, and the crash of bottle hurled through barroom mirrors, roared onward, onward and onward. Oh, life was complete. Occasionally a menacing form roamed up and down the aisle, searching for a huddled fugitive from supper. A sharp cry in the darkness, and a kid would be dragged, kicking and screaming, protestingly toward the exit sign and back into life. Then, finally, 3 quick Mighty Mouse cartoons in succession as a capper for the road, and it was all over for another week. Back out in the real world at last, splinter bands of bloated, sticky, Tootsie Roll-filled kids drifted homeward, recounting in absolute detail every labyrinthine twist and turn of each feature, reliving each fistfight and walk-down, each ambush and thundering escape in the embattled stagecoach as the ideological arguments began. The Ken Maynard faction snorted derisively at the Bob Steele fans. An occasional Roy Rogers nut would sing nostalgically, nasally, "On the streets of Laredo." A few holdouts for Tim Holt, outnumbered but game, all united finally in universal disdain for the real bottom of the list, Dick Ferran and Gene Autry. The great day was almost over. We all had to face the ordeal of trying to stuff down baked beans and spare ribs at supper, which is not easy on top of 4 Milky Ways and a rich compost heap of other assorted indigestibles drifting like some great glacier down through our digestive systems. The uproar on Saturday afternoons at the Orpheum was as nothing compared to the constant hoopla and razzmatazz of the rest of the week, when Mr. Doppler's Orpheum would rise to a fever pitch of excitement. Very little of it had anything to do with actual movies, although the Orpheum pretended that it was in the film business, and so did the customers. Monday night, immediately after supper, the faithful, or at least one contingent of them, would scurry through the darkening streets toward the sacred temple to play something called Screeno. I have heard that in other movie houses this was called Keno, but Mr. Doppler was a fundamentalist. It was Screeno in the Orpheum. As the Judy Canova fans pushed through the turnstiles, they would be handed a crude sheet of cardboard ruled off in squares with the big black letters, Screeno. Everybody has a chance to win. Watch your numbers. Next to the door was a wastebasket filled with corn kernels. Each lover of the cinematic art would grab a handful on his way to the humid arena of the Fun Palace, slide down in his seat, and wait for the action. About 7 o'clock p.m., that is, would come on the movie-tone news with the bathing beauties and the horse races, funny goose-stepping comic soldiers wearing scuttle helmets, marching in phalanxes to the sound of Deutsches über alles. Westbrook von Voorhees and the voice of doom would boom out over the newsreel. 10 minutes of previews of coming attractions featuring music by the Coming Attractions Band. And the first feature would begin with Ben Blue chasing Judy Canova around a haystack as the mob rustled their cards and crunched on corn kernels in keen anticipation of the gambling delights that were to follow. By the time Judy had deafened the multitude and the eighth reel had spun out, the moment of exaltation arrived. The house lights would go on, the popcorn bags stashed, and there would be a moment of suspended animation while the real reason all of them were there was getting underway. On stage, the great white screen stood empty. Mr. Doppler could be heard himself testing the PA system, his rich, dynamic voice. Hello, test, test. 1, 2, 3. Hello, can you hear me up in the booth, Fred? 1, 2, 3. And then silence. Next on screen, a great blue and red numbered wheel appeared with an enormous yellow counter, a big pointer, and Mr. Doppler would get right down to business. All right, folks, it's time again now to play the fun game, Screeno. Anyone filling out a diagonal or a horizontal line with corn kernels wins a magnificent grocery prize. Yell out, Screeno. Let us hear it, and be sure to check your numbers. And now, here we go. We're playing Screeno. A spectacular fanfare would wow in the sound system, since Doppler really believed in production all the way. And the evening would start. On the screen, the pointer, a yellow blur, spun as band music played softly behind. Everyone leaned forward in their seats, their cards held at ready as they waited for the call of fate and riches to lay its golden breath on their fevered, movie-loving brows. The pointer slowed and stopped. And Doppler's voice intoned, "The first number is B12. Rustlings, creaking of seats, muttering. Some steel mill wit up in the gloom hollers, Screeno! The crowd titters, and the pointer spins again. A constant obligato of dropping, rolling, and crunching kernels of corn, and excited mumblings played like a soft flame under the great pot of edible gold that all pursued. Finally, someone inevitably shouted, for keeps, Screeno! 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 And the first prize of the evening was snagged. Doppler, his voice trembling with emotion. And now the first Screeno gift of the evening, a $5 bag of groceries from the Piggly Wiggly store on Calumet Avenue. Credit extended, superb meats and groceries. We cash checks. This $5 bag of superb groceries goes to... The usher would hurry down the aisle with the winner's card and his name, and the audience shifting restlessly, distractedly, waiting for the next game to begin. And somewhere off in the middle distance, the sound of celebration as the winning party, the family up there in the upper deck, already tasting the Piggly Wiggly bacon, celebrated the great coup. The pointer world in action roared on. The kids, by the way, not eligible to participate under the strict international rules of classical Screeno, spent their time throwing corn kernels at the balcony and the silver screen. To the right of the stage glowed a magnificent smoked ham and all the other grocery gifts for the Screeno crowd. During the Depression, a 7-pound ham was good for at least 4 months in the average family, not including 800 gallons of rich, vibrant pea soup So Screeno was a very serious game. Rising above the usual Orpheum aroma, a rich mixture of calcified gum, popcorn, hot leatherette seats, steamy socks, and Woolworth Radio Girl perfume and hair oil, was the maddening scent of smoked bacon, fresh pickles, and crushed corn kernels. Screeno was played for at least 45 minutes, until the last can of Van Camp's A&P pork and beans had been won. The excitement rising upward until the final great moment, the grand award, a year's supply of Silver Cup bread, provided by the local A&P store. Bread truly was the staff of life to a dedicated Screeno addict. A year's supply of bread, the very bread that the Lone Ranger lived on. Silver Cup sponsored the Lone Ranger. And Tonto used it to make the French toast in the morning for the Lone Ranger. Immediately after the grand award, which of course Doppler masterfully squeezed for every drop of dramatic tension, the lights would go out, and on would come somebody with a rich Bavarian accent saying, "Monkeys is the craziest peoples." And once again, culture marched on. Do you remember that short? Monkey is the craziest peoples. And culture marched on into the next feature. There was never a recorded instant of a single feature playing the Orpheum. And so went Monday. Tuesday was known as Bank Night. Now, Bank Night was for the really big-time movie fans, and that crowd usually avoided Screeno like the plague. Every week, the Bank Night jackpot rose by $100 jumps, and every Tuesday night at 0 hour, amid a deep hush, the spotlight on stage, the sinister cage containing the Bank Night registration slips was spun as the world slowed in its flight around the sun. Mr. Doppler standing, solemn and straight, no razzle-dazzle on Bank Night, this was serious stuff, waited beside his silver microphone as the shimmering white card was drawn by one of the audience. A moment of agonizing hesitation, and in a quiet voice, Mr. Doppler would say, "Tonight's Bank Night registration drawing for $1,700. A pregnant pause at this point to let the $1,700 sink deeper into the souls of the Harpoon congregation, most of whom hadn't seen a whole $10 bill for 5 years running. $1,700. Everyone in the house had followed the progression of Bank Night from the first $100 to its present astronomical height, week by week. And each week, Mr. Doppler would change the great red figures on the marquee. And all week, 7 long days, the fevered Bank Night dreamers passed back and forth on their aimless errands, were constantly reminded by that marquee, $1,700. And next week, $1,800. Whew! As each week rolled into history, the sweat, the nervousness, the fear that someone else would strike it big grabbed at the very vitals of each registrant. He scrabbled and scraped week after week to scratch up the price of a ticket until finally at the $1,700 mark it became almost a compulsive nightmare. You've got to go every week. You've got too much invested in it now. The movies shown on Bank Night unreeled before unconscious and uncommitted glazed eyes, their pupils contracted to pinpoints glowing in the darkness, their breath coming in the telltale short pants of the near hysteric. $1,700 meant the difference between actual life and gnawing, grubbing, penny-grabbing, bare existence. On Bank Night, there were no friends. Nobody loved anybody else. Just solitary sparks of human protoplasm, man against man, woman against woman, alone, plotting, scheming, hoping against hope that no one else would win. Tonight's number is number 2295. Silence. A stunned, watchful, waiting, fearful audience. Will the 1,700 be claimed? Is 2295 here? You had to be here to win. A single thought in each depression-ridden mind. Judy Canova, Jack Oakey, and even Clark Gable drowned in a dark, swirling sea of anxiety and greed. Is the holder of that card in the house? 1. Silence. I repeat, number 2295 is the holder of that card in the house. 1, 2. An usher on the right side of the stage in a blue spotlight raised a padded mallet and struck a gong. Bong! The clamorous boom rolled out over the multitude like some death knell, echoing and re-echoing from coke machine to gilded cherubim, high above the arched stage and down to the depths of the hearer's subconscious, a sound that must be something like the one that will be heard on Judgment Day, before the great trumpets blow and Gabriel rises to summon the faithful from their graves. Once, a dramatic, twice, bong, another dramatic pause. 2295, 3 times, and out. Boing. A deep collective sigh of relief. Blessed, numb, tremulous relief rose from the darkness. The audience settled back in their seats. Already plans were underway in fevered minds on how to grab some dough and put it together for next Tuesday's admission. Oh, somewhere, someplace, in some dark mortgaged hut, the actual number 2295, who had decided to stay home this one night in order to save the 40 cents price, tossed uneasily in his sleep, unknowing, as the great ship of fortune sailed by him, unseen, unheard, into the darkness forever. How many of us have won things we never knew we'd won? The bed strings creaked as he shifted in his sleep. He slept on, unknowing that the great ship of fortune was now going over the horizon forever. Mr. Doppler played on the vast organ of human emotions like a master musician, twittering on the acquisitiveness stop as he possessed an evil genius. His soul was afire with evil. Wednesday night was amateur night. Between features, a long line of banjo players, mouth organ virtuosi, clog dancers, Bing Crosby imitators, and other talented out-of-work steelworkers would engage in mortal artistic combat for another list of grand awards. A free, all-expense-paid day trip to Chicago, which was a full 30 miles away. 10 vocal lessons at the Bluebird Music School, accordion our specialty, and 50 top $50 prizes as determined by the applause of the audience. At least that's what the poster in the lobby called it, applause. Applause is not exactly the word that described the pandemonium, the acrimony, the catcalls, the disdain, the obscene noises of enormous variety and general commotion that accompanied each act as clack battled clack in the audience. It set the earth to jiggling so that the vibrations alone could be felt over a radius of 30, 40 miles. The Orpheum on amateur night gave many of us who were fortunate enough to be in attendance at these Kabbalistic rituals a glimpse of life that left us with vague understanding of that thing, that stuff of which riots and historical movements are made. One night stands in particular in my mind. A bulky bricklayer clumped on stage. He clumped right up there in the front, stood in the middle of the stage. In the pit, the piano player began a flowery intro into Neapolitan Nights. The bricklayer pursed his lips wetly and began to whistle in a high, thin, bird-like trill, his hairy chest perspiring, cheeks popping, eyes bulging. An instant wave of pseudo-feminine whoops, "Oh, my!" rolled out over the audience and crashed like a riptide of derision among the hod carrier and his friends. He stopped in mid-trill right on stage. "All right, you bastards, who's a smartass out there? You son of a bitch, you want to fight?" His fists were like 2 giant clubs at his side. Another great roar, more of a kind of a unison snort, actually, from the audience en masse. The sweat gleamed on his forehead as he dredged his visceral depths with a quivering, snorting hawk. And to the offending artist, he let fly a large silver oyster into the void, which was caught turning over and over into the light of the spotlight. To a man cut to the quick, the outraged critics rose. They didn't like this kind of stuff. They rushed over, around, and under the seats, thousands of kids cheering and bird whistling. It was the first time that Mr. Doppler called the police in order to get the second feature underway. It was not going to be the last. And Thursday was sing-along night. Sing-along night. It was the one night of the week that Mr. Doppler was forced to book a real movie. Sing-along. You just sit there and sing. There were no prizes or anything. Any sap can sing. It was Thursdays that Bob Hope and Bing Crosby traveled their eternal road, panting and leering after Dorothy Lamour. It was on Thursday, sing-along night, that Gary Cooper sat tall in his dusty, worn saddle saying, "Yep." It was on Thursday that Andy Hardy, better known as Mickey Rooney, and Judy Garland decided to put on a show to buy the serum for the widow's boy dying of a strange, unnamed Hollywood disease, while Donald O'Connor, that rat, the wise guy Feshman, made passes at Andy's girl in the gym between tap dances. Thursday was serious picture night. You saw the real stuff that night. And in keeping with the solemn occasion, Mr. Doppler also presented the Orpheum sing-along. As Bob and Bing rode their camel off into the sunset, and the Paramount Mountain shimmered hotly on the beaded screen, rising from the cavernous darkness of the pit, electric motors humming, the mighty Orpheum Wurlitzer rose, sparkling and glowing, sequins shimmering and catching the light, a massive, brilliant, white, multi-tiered instrument. This organ rose like some specter, and seated before the impressive arching keyboard, golden wavy hair shimmering, white tuxedo coat spotless, sat the famous Orpheum organist, booming out Cheer-a-beer-a-bim. And on screen, a slide appeared with a screen of gypsies caught in mid-fandango, tambourines raised, eyes flashing hotly in eye-searing technicolor. The organist spun on his twirling seat, grinning a grinning set of dentures that made everything that Liberace was to do years later along the same lines pale to insignificance. The slide changed. Follow the bouncing ball and sing along with the world-famous Orpheum Wurlitzer. A beautiful moonlight scene appeared, sailboat in the middle foreground, two silhouetted couples mooning against the sky, and above, the words, "Red sails in the sunset, how sweetly." The white ball bounced from word to word as the audience, conditioned by countless hours of Kate Smith, Harry Horlick and the A&P Gypsies, Jessica Dragonette, and the Silver Masked Tenor, belted it out. A Depression audience did not mess around, and when that bouncing ball bounced, they belted. Beside me in the audience, my mother giggled self-consciously but sang on, her curlers rattling, her eyes shining as the mighty Orpheum organ bellowed. The empty coal bin and next month's rent forgotten, as slide after slide marched across Mr. Doppler's sing-along screen. The only time I ever heard my old man sing was when the mighty Wurlitzer, like some demonic pipe of Pan, drove him on. Betty Coed has lips of red for Harvard. Betty Coed has eyes of Yale's deep blue. Betty Coed, and on screen a cheerleader in white sweater and white ice cream pants and a big block Y held the microphone high as a golden-haired Coed, Betty herself, tilted her perky profile toward an orange sky as the ball bounced. So went Thursday. And after Thursday, inevitably, Friday. And it was Friday that finally proved to be Mr. Doppler's Armageddon. For years, theater owners everywhere had struggled bravely to keep the seats filled. Not that people didn't want to go to the movies, they did, even more maniacally than they do now. But cold cash was hard to come by, especially cash to be used for Fred McMurray viewing and Mickey Mouse ogling. A moviegoer had to have a real excuse for buying a ticket. an investment in reality, a utilitarian expense. And on one historic night, Mr. Doppler came up with his master stroke. A spectacular display in a gleaming glass case appeared without warning in the neo-mosque lobby of the beloved Orpheum. For extra dramatic effect, the lobby had been especially darkened with strategically placed baby pink, blue, and amber spots focused on the cause of the eventual downfall of Mr. Doppler and the Orpheum, too. Above the case, in fuchsia tinseled letters, the simple, stark, meaningful word blazed forth: free. Free. The motley throng who gathered in stunned silence on that fateful night stood slack-jawed and bedazzled by the incredible riches displayed before them, and it was all to be theirs, free, just for coming to the movies. Now, artistic sights are rare in the hamlets of the Midwest, slumbering quietly in the shade of the steel mills, caught in the tangled spider web of endless railroad tracks, and groaning under the weight of vast acres of junkyards. But when they do appear, the natives respond, let me tell you. Starving travelers in a wasteland of an artistic desert, they devour each scrap of beauty with a relish that warms the cockles. Tonight was no exception. The Three Stooges forgotten, they stood clogging up the lobby in dark, silent clumps of humanity, eyes shining, unbelieving. Row on row of radiant, magnificent works of pure beauty lay displayed before them, cushioned on dark, blood-red velvet, and seeing each observer's soul there in the darkness and setting it on fire with instant desire. They stood silent, almost afraid to believe the evidence before their very eyes. A simple, tasteful placard spelled it out, unmistakably so that even the dimmest wit could comprehend. Free. Free. Beginning next Friday, one piece of this magnificent set of artistic, deluxe, Perline Hollywood tableware, the dinner service of the stars, will be presented free to each adult woman in attendance. The moviegoer will be able to complete this 112-piece set of magnificent dinnerware and enjoy at the same time the finest of movie entertainment. Signed by the management, and in ink, Mr. Leopold Doppler. The amber spot played sinuously and enticingly over cascading ledge on ledge of pearlescent, sparkling, grape and floral-encrusted tureens and platters, saucers and gravy boats, celery holders and soup bowls. It was a display potent enough to bring moisture to the eye of a Middle Eastern caliph. It would probably have been difficult to knock together a complete set of any kind of dinnerware from among the entire audience of that night. My mother stood gazing at this artistic opulence, her breath coming in short pants, her eyes glowing like coals. Our cupboards at home were filled with a collection of jelly jars, peanut butter containers, plastic cottage cheese cups, and the assorted eating effluvia of the period. Her prized possession, which she brought out only for state occasions like big Thanksgiving Day meals maybe, was a matched Shirley Temple sugar and creamer set. It was of dark blue glass, and she loved it. Our silverware consisted of Tom-Mix spoons. You got it by sending in Ralston box tops, Clara Bow pickle forks, and a Betty Crocker bread knife with a rubber handle and cardboard blade. Dish borrowing and dish bringing were major social customs in the neighborhood. It was well known that my Aunt Clara had a set of 6 matched Mexican motif coffee cups, which she carried with her for any full-scale family ceremonial dinner. My mother, on the other hand, was the owner of a magnificent white meat platter with tiny violets spilling over the edges that had provided the underpinning for every turkey dinner in the family for years. The effect of the Orpheum's incredible offer, hence, was galvanic. The word spread like the bubonic plague, and by the end of the week of waiting, the air had become tense and fretful. It was as though the whole town was waiting for Christmas morning, which, like all great days, approached slowly and creakily. It was announced in the local paper that along with the first free dish offering, the movie was Tarzan and the Pygmies, would be shown, along with selected short subjects. Doppler was going all out. He was bringing Tarzan in for the big night. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear. By 7 p.m., a nervous serpentine wound its way halfway around the block, past the pool room, the Bluebird Tavern, Nick's hardware store, and almost to the Willie's Overland showroom, a full football field length away from the Orpheum. Our family, about halfway back in the mob, which had begun to gather early in the afternoon, was surrounded by a great waiting mass of suspicious skeptics. It was hard to believe this was really going to happen. A real dish was going to be given out free just to watch Tarzan and Lady Jane swing from the vines. Another paralyzing fear gripped the waiters. Would the dishes run out before he got inside and got his own? Rumors spread. The Pearline Deluxe display was a phony, just a come-on, and the dishes we'd get would be cheap, hollow reproductions of the truly beautiful original. Finally, the doors opened, and the mob surged forward. The box office roared with activity as we pushed and stumbled toward the marquee. Just inside the door, Mr. Doppler and two ushers stood, packing cases stacked behind them, handing out to each lady a beautiful, gleaming butter dish. What a start! Doppler, the master showman, realized that a smash opening was imperative for the success of any big-time act. He could have opened with a prosaic cup or a saucer, but his selection of a butter dish as an opener was little short of total inspiration. Handing a butter dish to housewives who came almost to a woman from oleomargarine families was masterful. In fact, few people in the crowd had ever even seen a butter dish before, and some had to be told how to use it. My mother, a reader of Good Housekeeping, recognized this rare object for what it was, a symbol of gentility. Rich people had butter dishes, good taste, and the expanse of life. She was delighted. She had a butter dish, and my kid brother had to be forcefully restrained in his desire to look at it and feel it. He wanted to hold it. We were oleo people, of course, and my mother would mix the white, lard-like butter substitute in a glass mixing bowl, adding coloring from the gelatin capsules which accompanied the package. We always referred to this as butter, and it was invariably served on a cracked white saucer used only for that purpose. Our new butter dish was a first step into the affluent world of the 20th century. Mr. Doppler beamed, his black suit crinkling as he clanked butter dish after butter dish out, distributing largesse to the multitude. "Next week there'll be a different piece, lady," he said over and over. Maybe a bun warmer next time, who knows? Thus he insidiously planted the seed in the mind of each butter dish clutcher that next week would even be more exotic. What the hell is a bun warmer? The hackles of desire rose even higher as they filed into the darkened auditorium. What's a bun warmer? You warm buns in it, you fathead. What do you think? Snatches of complex table etiquette debates drifted back and forth as the mob went up the aisle, butter dishes clanking. The Tarzan movie began, the popcorn bags ripped open, and the evening was complete. As soon as the kitchen light went on back home, even before my mother had taken off her coat after the movie, she feverishly slammed open the refrigerator door, and the butter dish was put into action. Loaded with oleo, its pearline finish lighting up the linoleum for yards around, it rested in the center of the white enamel kitchen table. Dish night had come to Holman, Indiana. The incredible news of Mr. Doppler's largesse spread through the neighborhood almost instantly, over back fences, through tangled jungles of clotheslines, up alleys, into basements, up front porches, into candy stores and meat markets. The winged word spread. Red, chapped, water-wrinkled hands paused on clothes wringers and washboards, bathrobe-clad figures hunched over sinks, nodding with amazement. Free dishes at the Orpheum. They're doing it. They're actually doing it. Neighbors trooped into kitchens all over town to observe firsthand the beautiful works of art that somehow had come into our lives. Our butter dish was observed by dozens of neighbors who stood around and just watched it silently. Says, "My God, never seen one." The following Friday, the Orpheum drew crowds from a 3-county area. a jostling throng that stood in long, expectant lines to see Blondie Takes a Trip, starring Penny Singleton and Arthur Lake, and to receive as compensation for that trial by fire a Perline finish bun warmer. Mr. Doppler did not fail his public. Bun warmers flooded Lake County in a massive deluxe Hollywood finish tide. Well, there were few buns to warm in that area, but the Calumet region was ready in case any buns showed up. The movies, and the Orpheum in particular, had never known such total and complete popularity. It was more than popularity. It was verging on true love. The other movie in town, the Paramount, tried desperately to stem the rising tide of Mr. Doppler's popularity. A huge glowing sign appeared in their marquee announcing that they were prepared to offer free a 187-piece set of Movieland Mexican plastoware designed personally by Gilbert Rowland, and including the permanent, indelibly embossed Ray's signature, his own, on each and every piece. It was too late. It was too late. The incandescent Perline beauty of the Hollywood dinnerware of Mr. Doppler's coup had a grip on the aesthetic fancy of the population that was unbreakable. I think it was the pearl color that finally did him in. A whole new dimension had been added to art appreciation in northern Indiana. And even Mr. Gilbert Rowland's Mexican plastic dinnerware was swept under the carpet. The first evening we actually used our bun warmer was a red-letter day in the family annals. Mr. Doppler was in the saddle, and his power grew from week to week as each succeeding piece was added to the growing collection that began to gleam from practically every kitchen cupboard in town, crowding jelly glasses and peanut butter jars further and further and further to the rear. The third week saw the first cup and saucer combination. Oh, this was a two-piece bonus, a cup and a saucer. The fourth week, a petite, delicately modeled egg cup, an egg cup, the first that was ever seen in the Midwestern states. Week by week, the crowds grew larger. The tension mounted as piece after piece was added to family collections. Speculation was rife as what the next week would bring, because Doppler didn't tip his hand ever. He just hinted once in a while. His aides would pass out, say, celery dishes. A special dish for your celery. How about that for fancy? Consomme bowls. Nobody knew what consomme was. When somebody said, well, you serve your tomato soup, your Campbell's tomato soup in it. They, oh, I see. Next week, an olive urn with a pick. Now, how about that? It was an urn to put your olives in, and it came with a little pick. You pick them out like that. Well, Doppler never exactly said it would be an olive urn with a pick. He just hinted that, you see. A sort of question. He would say it like, maybe an olive urn with a pick, huh? Well, the audience would squirm in their seats as the soundtrack engulfed them, speculating, already anticipating next Friday. They'd love to see this olive urn. The weeks flew by. The town was hooked. They had the free dinnerware monkey on their back, a 112-pound specimen clamped on their backs and growing heavier and heavier every week. Ladies in the last stages of childbirth were wheeled onto the Orpheum, gasping in pain to keep the skein going. Creaking grandmothers, halt and blind, were led to the box office by grandchildren. Ladies who had not seen the light of day since the Crimean War were pressed into service. They sat numbly, deftly in the Orpheum seats, their watery eyes barely able to perceive the shifting, incomprehensible images on the screen, their gnarled talons clasping a sugar ball for dear life. I remember particularly the night that we got the big platter. That's in caps, the big platter, as it became known in our family over the years. The big platter, a proper name like the house on the hill, the basement, the garage. The big platter was important. There was only one big platter in every complete set of dinnerware. This was one of a kind in the set of dinnerware, the crowning jewel in Doppler's diadem. For weeks we had filed past the magnificent display in the lobby, and there in the exact center, catching the amber spots, glowing like the sun, was the big platter. And tonight it was ours. Oh, one of the saddest sounds I've ever heard was the crash in the darkness of some numb-fingered housewife carried away by a brilliantly executed scene by Joe E. Brown, loosening her grip in laughter. A sudden panic, and her platter was no more. Scattered in a million pearlescent slivers among the peanut shells and Tootsie Roll butt ends that formed a thick compost heap underfoot. Recriminations, suppressed sobs, and the entire family rose and filed out, their only reason for being there gone in a split single second. My mother held ours with both hands, clasped over her chest in a death grip. Few of us at the time realized in the exultation of the moment that the end of the party was already in sight. Without warning, one night, the patrons were handed a finely sculptured, grape-encrusted gravy boat. Now, this windfall was greeted with hosannas in our innocence. The following week, a strangely furtive Doppler dealt it out to each female patient another gravy boat, all the while mumbling something over and over about, "The shipment was wrong this week. You can exchange this gravy boat for a dinner plate next week. They sent us another shipment of gravy boats. You can exchange this." Vague, uneasy at this unexpected break in the rhythm of dish collecting, the women filed into the theater, bearing the next week redundant gravy boats. The third Friday was significantly marked by a sudden, avenging rainstorm that grew in intensity until, as the Orpheum hour approached, it became a giant cloudburst. Women scuttled through the dark, through the howling rain, carrying paper-wrapped gravy boats, to be met at the turnstile by Mr. Doppler and a shame-faced crew surrounded by cases of more dry, shining gravy boats. "Bring all your gravy boats in next week. We will positively exchange them next week. The shipment—" The tide had turned. What had been, weeks before, a gay rabble of happy ticket buyers had become a menacing, pushing, dispirited mob. All through the fourth week, a strange quiet hung over Lake County. Even the weather seemed to reflect a sinister mood of watchful waiting. Fitful, dry winds blew across the rooftops. Screen doors creaked in the night. Dogs bayed at the sullen moon, and children cried out in their sleep. That fourth Friday turned unexpectedly cold, a chill, clammy cold, somehow suggestive of the crypt, mysterious tombs, deserted caves. Solitary, dark-clad women bearing shopping bags full of gravy boats converged on the arena. By 7 p.m., a murky clot of humanity milled under the marquee and spilled out raggedly along the gloomy, shuttered street. The doors remained shut. 7:45. 7:50. A few in the forefront of the rabble tapped demandingly on the wrought brass gateway. 7:55. It was obvious that something was up. The doors then finally, reluctantly, swung open. As the vanguard approached the turnstile, they knew that the worst had come to pass. For the first time in many weeks, Mr. Doppler was absent from his post of honor. Two weedy substitute ushers, unknown strangers, eyes downcast, handed to each ticket holder another gravy boat. The fourth gravy boat in as many weeks. Each gravy boat was received in stony silence, quietly stuffed into shopping bag or hat box, completing a set of 4 carried hopelessly for their exchange. The feature that night was the Bride of Frankenstein. the story of a man-made monster that returned to pursue and crush his creator. How symbolic. For long moments the house lay in darkness and almost complete silence, waiting for Mr. Doppler's next move. On this night, no gay music played through the theater loudspeakers, no coming attractions. The candy counter was dark and untended, as though Mr. Doppler himself felt that the impending end was near. The mothers waited. A sudden blinding spotlight made a big circle on the maroon curtain next to the gold silent screen, and then out of the wings stepped Mr. Doppler to face his moment of truth. He cleared his throat before speaking into the ringing silence. No microphone tonight. He seemed to have shrunken somehow, his eyes erased by black shadows in that blue light. His tie was a little crooked, and for the first time scuff marks and dust marred the gleaming toes of his black pumps. His coal-black suit was vaguely rumpled. "Ladies," he began plaintively, I have to apologize for tonight's gravy boat." A lone feminine laugh, mirthless and cold and acrid, mocking, punctuated his pause. He went on as though he hadn't heard. "I give you ladies my personal guarantee, that's personal guarantee, that next week—" At this point a low, subdued hissing arose. Spontaneously, the sound of cold venom landing on boiling lava began to rise from the depths of the void. Doppler, his voice bravely raised, continued, "Next week, ladies, please, now ladies, next week, I personally guarantee, we will exchange all gravy boats for—" Then it happened. A dark shadow sliced through the hot beam of the spotlight, turning over and over, and casting upon the screen an enormous magnified outline of a great gravy boat. Spinning over and over, it crashed with a startling suddenness on the stage at Doppler's feet. It started it. Instantly, a blizzard of gravy boats filled the air. Doppler's voice rose to a wail. Ladies, please, we will exchange." A great crash of gravy boats, like the breaking of surf on an alien shore, drowned out his words, and then spreading to all corners of the house, shopping bags were emptied as the arms rose and fell in the darkness, maniacal female cackles and obscenities driving Doppler from the stage. High overhead, someone switched off the spotlights, and Frankenstein flicked across the screen. But it was too late. More gravy boats, and even more. It seemed to be an almost inexhaustible supply, as though some great mother lode of gravy boats had been struck. The eerie soundtrack of The Bride of Frankenstein mingled with the rising and falling cadence of wave on wave of hurled gravy boats. Outside, the distant sound of approaching riot cars. The house lights went on. The Orpheum was suddenly filled with a phalanx of blue-jowled policemen. The audience sat amid the ruin, taciturn, satisfied. Under the guidance of pointed nightsticks, they filed into the grim darkness of the outside world. The dish night fever was over once and for all. The great days of the Orpheum and Leopold Doppler had passed into history forever. Somewhere 1,000,000 miles away, a short man with a funny mustache and a trench coat was starting the cameras a-rolling for the next great feature, which was to star all the male kids in the world. The doors of the Orpheum never opened again. Mr. Doppler disappeared from our lives forever, leaving behind countless sets of uncompleted Hollywood star-time dinnerware. Memories of Errol Flynn stripped to the waist, climbing the rigging of a pirate barkentine, George Raff smooth and oily under a white snap-brim fedora, surrounded by camel-haired coated henchmen, Bobby Breen and Diana Durbin in a rose-covered swing with Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald waltzing endlessly under Japanese lanterns. Jose Iturbi sat at a piano made of ivory, and mirrors playing great rhapsodies before 1,000-piece orchestras in a perpetual MGM grand finale. Doppler had done his work well. "Hey, Bud, you want me to warm up your cup?" The counterman snapped me back from screenland abruptly. Before I could answer, he moved away. I knew what I had to do. Stealthily, moving like a cat in one quick motion, I swept the damp green bowl into my zippered briefcase. In my booming John Wayne voice, to keep him off my trail, I barked, "Well, I gotta push off, gotta get going, before it rains again." I slapped a buck on the counter and quickly scuttled out with my priceless objet d'art concealed under my arm. For a brief instant I almost panicked as I thought I heard the sound of high, tinny voices of the Andrews sisters singing "Roll Out the Barrel" coming out of my attaché case, but it was just the buzzing of a leaky neon sign transformer. An instant later I was out on the turnpike, jaw set in my widely applauded Claude Rains smile, the hard-earned result of hundreds of hours logged in secret practice before the bathroom mirrors of my adolescence, carrying with me safely a relic that would confound and bemuse as yet unborn future generations of anthropologists, a mute, lumpy Rosetta Stone of our time.